Hey everyone, welcome to the Industry Show. I'm your host Nitin Bajaj, and joining me today is Shruti Deorah. Shruti, welcome on the show.
Thank you so much, Nitin, for having me here. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Pleasure is all ours. So let's start with getting to know Shruti. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, sure. I think all of us wear many different hats in our lives, and we are really a sum total of our experiences. So let me talk about my three primary roles that I see as of today and three experiences or themes that have shaped me over the years. So I think my first role is that of a mom to my two little monkeys, 11-year-old boy and a 7-year-old girl. And they keep me on my toes and I love it. And secondly, I'm a proud partner and spouse to my husband, who's an entrepreneur, investor, and author. His name is Kashyap, and we met way back at IIT Bombay. Um, and I would say, as an individual, I'm trying to play a small part in making this world a better place. So that's where I come from. And in terms of what has shaped me, I think my childhood in a middle class family growing up in Delhi with very limited means, but the emphasis on excellence in education, or should I say learning. My dad always encouraged me to not be shy and ask the questions. And I think that I have carried that forward in my life, always be having that critical thinking. And then secondly, I would say what I pride myself in is adapting, assimilating, and thriving in very different environments. So my first big move was from my leaving my protected family environment to and going to Bombay to spend many years at IIT. It was a lot of fun, but definitely out of my comfort zone. And then came to the US as a young adult to work here. And then over the years, I moved from the corporate world to the nonprofit world, to the government world, now to a research setting. And over the last 20 years, my husband and I, we have split time. And I think all this change, while uncomfortable, has basically helped me or forced me rather to focus on looking at the pros or the positives of any setting or any place and really enjoying that while taking the cons and the downsides in my stride. So that I give credit to my husband to make us move multiple times between India and US. And then I would say the third and a more important one would be the inspiration to serve came when I was in high school and with starry-eyed idealism, I understood what the United Nations does, for example, or really read a lot about the motivation and the impact the IS officers have in India. And much later, of course, I understood that the selfless service my mom gave to the extended family and the local community. And I think I went on to the corporate world for financial security reasons, but then the calling to do something about the hard issues that are facing India and our society that came back. And when I started thinking about these issues, I explored and understood the nexus between energy access and energy consumption on one side, development and climate change. And that's where I landed. And environmentally sustainable development is my passion. And within that, the role of policy. So that's where I landed.
Fascinating journey. And one thing I can relate to a lot of those parts, having grown up in Bombay myself, we just talked about this briefly, having had a small stint in Delhi, and then, of course, moving here later in life to start from essentially scratch and building those relationships. And I think one thing that is well known within the entrepreneurial community is the ability to adapt, to change to environments, to people around you. And that's what makes us successful in not being clinging on to something when things are good or when things are bad, not getting hooked on to one or the other. So I'm glad that you had that foundation of change and adaptability all along, and you make this seem so easy. And I'm sure that's what made you strive as you went from city to country to through your transitions through the corporate, nonprofit, and government. very different cultures, very different environments.
Yeah, and very different learnings. And
Yeah.
that's, I feel like, the part I would like to focus on. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you started to talk about a little bit of the why. What I would love for you to do and share with us is what is the India Energy and Climate Center? Tell us a little more about
Mhm.
why you started this and what is the mission and the vision behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, this is a center, India Energy and Climate Center. We formally established it summer of last year. So we are pretty new, not hit the 1 year mark just yet. This is at the Public Policy School at UC Berkeley. And our mission is to basically empower sustainable economic growth for India and the global south. And we do that through technology informed policy, through capacity building, through US India dialogue, and through South to South collaboration. And I think in terms of its genesis, climate change is a very tech heavy space. To take the world from where it is today to almost zero carbon emissions by mid century, it's a huge technology transformation that we are talking about. And this technology is moving so fast that policymakers, what we realize, have to play a lot of catch up, and there's a lot of vested interests and money lobbying going on. And what we have, what we strive to be is that neutral strategic partner who can take a systemic approach to this energy transition for India and include and keeping in mind India's domestic interests of energy security, of industrial competitiveness, of environmental impacts, of livelihoods. And so that's the genesis of the center. And why we are doing this now is because um, India's development is actually inextricably linked to climate change, really. Because on one hand, even with very little historical contribution to emissions, India will face maximum damages due to climate change. When you think about millions of people living along the coast, downstream from Himalayan glaciers, dependent on agriculture. So, on one hand, India stands to suffer so much. On the other hand, we have 10 million plus youth who are coming into our workforce every year. And you're not going to be able to absorb them all into services industry. You need large scale manufacturing. And as the developed world shifts to a clean energy based economy, India must seize this opportunity to become a manufacturing leader in clean tech. And India is now the fastest growing major economy in the world. So the decisions that India makes in terms of energy assets today are going to have consequences for the next 3 decades. And so US and India being such natural partners in this journey, being the world's largest democracies and whatnot, I felt strongly that the time is to act now, and we want to strive to meet the moment.
Those are fascinating and huge numbers. And as you rightly said, the decisions that are made today and in the next few years are going to stay with us, and we're going to see the impact of that. I want to bring this into perspective. You're not even a year into this journey, but if you can help share through the vision, through what's on the cards as of right now, the sense of the impact this center is likely to bring on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, let me clarify. So the center we are a small team. So we are a team of about 10 people and a few affiliated faculty at UC Berkeley. But the people have been in this space and working for a combined experience of many decades. So even though the center is new, the people several of them have been in the Berkeley ecosystem between Berkeley Lab and the university. And I've been here 5+ years, and then we have new people joining us. So this team, even though small, has had a really outsized impact. Actually, let me talk about a couple of examples. One, this team's research is the premise for US government's clean energy goals. The US government's target of clean power grid, 100% clean power grid by 2035 is based on my colleagues' research. Similarly, US government's goal of 50% carbon emission reduction by 2030, and several other goals in the context of California, several other aspects of the Inflation Reduction Act, all came from this team's research. And on India's front, we have been engaged with the Indian government for, again, over a decade. And I had, in fact, myself and one of my other colleagues actually worked in the government as well. But in terms of impact, India's current clean energy targets, renewable energy goals of 450 to 500 gigawatts of solar and wind and other renewable capacity by 2030 was informed by our research. Similarly, the target that India announced in terms of an energy storage for 2030, energy storage obligation came from our research. And that basically spawns an investment and a market creation of hundreds of billions of dollars. So I think in terms of impact, there has already been pretty sizable impact of the people involved in this center. And we are pretty grateful for the deep connections we have with the government and the receptivity that we see at really the highest levels because of our rigorous and neutral approach to this problem.
Is it fair to say that you and the team were already working in this space, but you saw the need to have a focus around this because of what's to come with all of the different things you mentioned, right? India's growth, where it's at, the demographic, and the impact it's going to create. So it's not like a bunch of people got together and started something. You guys were already doing the work. And now you said, let's focus on this so we
Right.
can continue to have a sizable impact on our future.
Absolutely. And I just want to add one small point. I think what I wanted to do was also expand our policy outreach and engagement. Again, there's a lot of great research that the team was doing, but we did not have the people to engage systematically with more policymakers. And I also felt that the Indian diaspora here, people who understand the linkages between climate and India's development and the outsized impact India has as a de facto leader of the global south, and that it is poised to become the second largest emitter after China by mid-century. People who understand that, if they were to think about that, where is a center of excellence where we could support, where we could engage? We are sitting here in California, which is a clean energy leader. Such deep linkages between the two countries. So I thought, let's create this platform really so that the sum can be bigger than its parts.
Love that. And again, thank you for doing this. It's extremely important. People may not see it because we tend to have this notion of out of sight, out of mind. I can close my eyes and wish things away, which obviously does not happen. So really important work. You've been doing it for many years. Thank you to you and your team for setting that focus and bringing this to the fore. As we talk about the impact and the focus here, I'd love for you to share the one big challenge you're facing as the de facto experts in this space. There is a lot of moving parts, a lot of political willpower that I'm sure you have to work around. What's the one big thing you would like to call out?
Yeah, I think specifically to the center, I'll talk about an India-specific challenge, notwithstanding the bigger challenge everybody is facing, where we are poised to quadruple our oil production as a world by 2030, which is, let's not go there. But in the Indian context, I think the big challenge is really that India's energy demand is growing really fast. Just in terms of electricity consumption, it's 7 to 8% per year. It's just really fast. And they need to scale up their resources to meet all this demand. Blackouts are not required, feasible, or allowed anymore. So what's happening is that even though government of India is doing a lot, and I would say they are doing a lot to deploy renewable energy capacity, such as based on solar and wind, there are real on-ground implementation challenges. And that's the challenge that we are trying to address, that if India does not deploy this clean energy capacity fast enough, it will have no choice but to build more coal. But once you build a coal plant, it lasts you for 30 years. Yeah, exactly. And everybody knows what happens in China over the last 2 decades. They've built so much coal capacity, right? I think, and the challenge is really that the whole system was designed for a coal heavy grid. And we have to really shift the whole process, the whole system, the whole mindset to a renewables heavy kind of grid. And that's just in the power sector. Similarly, in India's industrial sector, there's a huge expansion of steel capacity that's going to happen. And if all of that is coal-based, then it gets locked in, right? These are the challenges we are trying to address to make sure that the investment decisions today and are in favor of clean energy, but also addressing real on-ground challenges at the state level or at the central level that are real and that are basically slowing down this space. So that's one. And in the just a more mundane challenge, I would say, is fundraising, right? Because I'm an accidental fundraiser. It's just, I feel strongly that we have really an aggregation of some of the brightest minds in the world who understand this transformation and clean energy transition policy and technology issues very deeply. But we really are running out of time. This decade is critical, and we would like to expand our impact and our footprint on this work.
You actually stole my words, because I was going to say, essentially trying to get people to think differently can be extremely challenging. The amount of time and effort and the research that you need to show as to why they should make a different decision than the one they've been making for the last 10, 20, 30 years can be extremely challenging. Nobody likes change. And then on the other end, you mentioned what I would translate as the last mile connectivity issues, the on the ground implementation. Again, you have to train an entire workforce on doing something of a way which has never been done before or is alien to them. So that would take a lot of resources. Yeah. And as you said, you have the best minds that have already shaped policy for a number of decades. And now it's time for us to focus on helping India make the right choices, and not just make the choices, but also implement them. So,
yes. And that becomes like a new model of development, because let's remember, the world has never seen a model of development that was not based on fossil fuels. So India has to literally invent a new way of development and do it for rest of the developing world, because India has the resources and the bright minds that can actually make it happen. Yeah.
Big responsibility, but that's the best shoulders to carry them.
It's the whole ecosystem.
Now, as we talk about challenges, I would love to focus on opportunities, because that's where our future is. What's the most exciting one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I already maybe touched upon it. One is that even though previously we were engaged at the central government level in India, now we have the capacity and the bandwidth as we expand to engage at the state level, because a lot of decisions are actually made at the state level, and a lot of deployment barriers also exist at the state level. And we see some solutions, and we are able to offer those while working closely with a few states. And it's not just on the deploying the solar and wind, but also looking at, as I said, let's say green hydrogen and green steel and electric mobility. And we do have a lot to offer, and it's really exciting that now we are able to bring it to the states. So that's one. And the another quick one I would say is that we're just starting to collaborate with a production house in the US to create a short form documentary on climate perspectives from the global south. So if you sit here and if you've been following the climate discourse, you would notice that sometimes the media narratives can be too simplistic, right? The conversation is almost controlled by the Western media, and they don't really understand what are the real, challenges that a developing country like India is facing. So I feel strongly that we need a little bit more nuance to this conversation. And that's our objective with this project. And we are fundraising for this documentary now. But whenever that happens, and I hope that happens, I feel it will be a big addition to the conversation here.
That's such a huge thing, right? That nuance of what are those challenges, whether it's a developed economy versus developing one, or just even the cultural norms and why people do what they do, that adds into the climate change or any of these implementation challenges, is very important.
Yeah. And one story I just remembered, which I would like to share, is that when sometimes here I have to tell them that in India, there are no climate deniers. Guess what? They're already facing impacts of climate change. Somebody told me that they went and met some farmers in drought-prone Maharashtra, and they said, don't tell us climate change is happening. We can see it. Can you help us? So I think that's the difference. Indians don't have the luxury to deny climate change.
Yeah, and we don't have the unlimited resources there. with the density we have, when
Mhm.
something happens, the impact is real, it's immediate. We don't
Mhm.
have that luxury of, oh, let's divert resources here because we have excess on this side. That's so true.
Yeah.
Now, as we talk about the future, I'm super excited about this documentary, by the way.
So we haven't started yet. We are still
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, and we have to make it real, right? That excitement has to exist. So I want to make it come true. So
Yes, I think it's a big gap, and I think the friction that you see between India and rest of the kind of like US EU bloc when climate negotiations happen, I think that's where we need to work on because everybody has to work together in this. Yeah,
this is our planet.
yeah, yeah.
Now, as we look at the bright future and the opportunities, I want to pause, take a look in the rearview mirror,
Mhm.
your personal and professional life, and ask you to share two moments. One where things did not work out as you had expected, there was failure, lessons that came out of it, and another one where things blew your expectations and became a success beyond what you had imagined.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I think there are so many failures, but that's a life well lived, I would say. But the one I would like to share in this context is when way back in 2008, 2009, I was working with Clinton Climate Initiative in India, and that was my first time trying to do public-private partnership, thinking about climate change and what are the solutions that can be implemented. And we were talking to a few cities in India, Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai, about hybrid electric buses. Okay. Of course, hybrid electric cars were here in the US. I was driving one in the US in 2005, but hybrid electric buses at that time were expensive, but on paper, they made a lot of sense because you would recover the initial investment in X years or something, right? And they would reduce your emissions, your air pollution. So it made a lot of sense. And we were trying to sell this concept. And every time I went to talk to a local, the city bus corp agency, they said that our city needs so many thousand buses.
Mm.
We don't even have money to buy those buses. And you are saying, I should buy this one bus instead of three buses because you think climate change is important. And yeah, that really helped me understand. And this is early on, right? Really helped me understand that you cannot bring solutions from the West to the developing world. They do not apply. The context is so different. And that is why at the India Energy and Climate Center, we are very cautious and conscious of this. Every solution we propose is for that country's context and for India's political and policy context and market context. So that's one I would say. And then in terms of success, I would say one recent success is that we were able to support the Indian government and really understand, in really pushing the envelope of what's possible with clean energy in the 2030 timeframe, that actually India can meet its growing energy demand with clean energy cost effectively. And then one personal contribution that was that we were supporting a lot on what would be the policy and regulatory design to get there, to get to these 2030 goals. And that has been taken and acknowledged by Government of India, that they have taken our recommendations and working on it. And that would really help states change their perspective of, rather than resisting clean energy because it's hard to manage, they're able to probably see it in a way that clean energy can be the main actor in meeting the demand instead of playing a supporting role.
Well, congratulations and thank you. Because again, I know it's not easy to change those minds. Even when there is credibility, there is always vested interest and many, as they say, irons in the fire that may prevent them from making the right choices. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think we want to continue the work, continue supporting the policymakers to take these key decisions, and that's our role. Yeah.
That's amazing. Now, working with politicians in the US and India, change makers, state level bureaucrats, how do you de stress? What do you do for fun?
Yeah. I think right now with the kids where they are, I think just spending time with kids and family. And as a family, we really love to explore and travel and hike around. And so that's the main way. Then I would say as an individual, I like music and dancing and yoga. And yeah, those are some of those ways, few ways we have fun.
Now, on to my favorite part of the show, the one-line life lessons. Would love for you to share your life lessons with us.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I had to write a few down because,
Good.
yeah, I think there have been, of course, we find inspiration from lots of leaders we hear or read about or something that connects with us. So I think I would like to share one, you can say an inspiring quote, but also a lesson, which is what Gandhiji said, that the earth can provide enough for everyone's needs, but not for everyone's greed. And that's really something we have to remind ourselves, at least I remind myself very often, because unconstrained capitalism or growth is going to have, without including the environmental costs, is the main reason for where we are today. And then a few other life lessons are, I think one is just chase your inner joy. So wherever your heart feels connected, pursue that, I would say. That's the recipe. Then another lesson that's from Bhagavad Gita that I really hold close to my heart is that you have a right to your actions, but not entitled to or don't be attached to the fruits of your actions. The original Sanskrit word line for it. And another one I would say is by Sri S.N. Goenka, who is the person who brought Vipassana back to India. Vipassana is a meditation technique. And he says that everything in the field of mind and matter is impermanent. And this impermanence is permanent. So just reminding ourselves that everything is impermanent, I think that is really key. And then last but not the least, I would say another life lesson is that life is empty and meaningless. And it's really, and I don't mean it in a negative way. I just mean it in a way that life is an empty canvas and you can add whatever meaning that you like to it. I think you can add whatever colors you like. And I'm a person of colors and I like to throw in a bunch of colors and end up with a colorful bouquet in the end. So I'm grateful for my journey and my lessons and blessings. So those are a few life lessons.
Shruti, thank you so much. And just to reflect on the last one, I see a lot of color. So it's in the genes, you're passing it on. That's a good thing.
Yeah, that's just a collage of artwork of my kids that it's in my office.
Thank you again for making the time to
Thank you so
come on the
much.
show, sharing your journey, your story, and your life lessons with us. We really appreciate it. Congratulations again on the journey so far. Please keep doing what you do. Keep us in a safe environment for years to come. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me and giving me this opportunity to talk about my life and my story. Thanks, Nitin. It was a pleasure.